Welcome back to the Midnight Mirage School of Learning Opportunities. Just want to thank the people for tuning in right now. In this lesson and in this episode, this will pertain to your historical investigation. All right, so this will be a history lesson. We'll answer a few questions, hit on some points that I was thinking about earlier. Those of us that are from mainland North America, meaning that we come from one of the quote unquote 50 states of the United States of America. We are a very, very distinct ethnic group. We have our own history, and our people have been confused because there have been these general terms like quote unquote black that have been put on us. And you have melanated people of all nations and different ethnic groups that are foreigners, and they've come to the United States of America for various reasons. And there can be, as I said, some confusion as to who is who. So that's kind of what I want to do in this tape. It's going to be a history lesson on who is who are quote unquote black Americans, all right? Some of these other melanated foreigners that come here, and also who are the Latino / Hispanic Americans, because yesterday evening, I was speaking with an elderly gentleman. You know, he was in his early 60s. And if he hears this tape, salute to him. But, I was speaking to him and we were talking about some things that also inspired this tape as well. A lot of historical context, and him being an older man, him being from California, he was able to put me on game with a lot of stuff and confirm most of what I already knew. All right. So I just want to share some of that with you all. And as I said, this tape is for anybody to receive the information and to raise their consciousness on this subject. But in my heart of hearts, I'm really doing this for the mainland North American so-called black people, because as I've said, we've been horrendously misled when it comes to a lot of information. I also want to give a disclaimer before I go forward. You all are going to hear me using a lot of quote unquote biblical terms in this tape. A lot of quote unquote biblical terms, meaning terms or terminology, words that are found in the Bible, or they may be found in the Quran. But when I use these terms, I'm using them in a context of history. So whether a person believes in a higher power or not is their own individual private business. But most of my historical, research and references, I do use the Bible as a primary source. So these terms, when you get into, your own studies, especially if you're objective and you're reading from people of all ethnic groups, all nationalities, that have all various phenotypes, all different skin tones, you'll see these terms used. You'll see them used in the secular world, and you'll see them used in the religious world, okay? So you're going to hear me using terms like Shemitic, Hamitic, Canaanite, Israelite, but understand that these terms are used in both secular literature and religious literature. When I say secular literature, I really mean the corporate world. As they say, the separation of church and state. So we're talking about the state, government, the financial world, profits, the bottom line. As I said, corporation. The Tower of Babel society. So, but even those people in that world that may even be atheists, because a lot of the secular world is godless. But even people in that realm use these terminologies. And of course, also people that, create religious literature, they use them as well. So I don't want you to become frightened or, start turning your face upside down when you hear me using some of these biblical terms. Because what you're going to find out is in most of the books and references that you use, government documents, etc., some of these terminologies, they show up. All right. So what I want to talk briefly about is the history of Europa, or what we know of as Europe. Now, the first thing you notice is that Blackbeard, why did you use the term Europa? I know the term as Europe. Well, the term Europa actually is a Canaanite Phoenician term. All right. So that is a term that goes back to the Canaanite Phoenician people, who are a melanated group of people. All right. I also want you to understand that most of these historical terms and just history itself, it has the veneer of a narrative. So, like for example, the word Moor or Moorish, there are a lot of people out there today that think that that term pertains to somebody that may be an Arab or someone that is practicing Islam as a Muslim. And they also think that these are fair-skinned people. Whereas if you look into Antiquity and some of those documents, you'll see the term Moorish used in another way. So the word Europa is the same, all right? So just understand right now that the word Europe or Europa, it comes from a Canaanite Phoenician alphabet and language, okay? And also culture, because the word Europa actually is one of the female descendants of Canaanite nobility. The next thing I want to talk about is Southern Europa or Southern Europe, Italy, Spain, Portugal, basically that area of the Mediterranean. All right. So right now, picture in your mind Southern Europe or the Mediterranean. As I said, the areas of Iberia or Spain, Portugal, Rome, Italy. Just think about that area in your mind right now. What ethnic groups populated these lands in the late 1400s? Because us being mainland North Americans, they give us this historical narrative that quote unquote Christopher Columbus, who's this Spaniard, came to the Americas in 1492. And, they started in Southern and Central America and they made their way north. And after that, they tell us that the French and the Dutch came and set up colonies. And then after that, of course, you have your English. So this is what we're told. And we're also told that during this time period, you had melanated groups coming from quote unquote Africa, that we were brought over with these groups. All right. So just keep that in mind. So as I said, what ethnic groups populated the lands of Southern Europa, Italy, Spain, Portugal in the late 1400s? What I want you to understand right now is that these lands were populated by Shemitic and Hamitic ethnic groups. All right. These are two different type of indigenous melanated people. All right. So they come from two different ethnic groups of original melanated people. Now we know that the whole earth, all the 7 continents, from the beginning of time, there was an original group of earth people. But as time went on, people spread out. And we do all know that in all the original civilizations, and when when order was established, that it were people of color or indigenous original people in all these continents setting up these civilizations. So if that's the case, that meant that, they were all of color. They were all melanated people of all shades. But did they all come from the same ethnic group? That is a very, very serious question you must ask yourself. Just because somebody has a brown skin complexion or a copper colored skin complexion or a dark skin complexion, do they all come from the same ethnic national groups? All right. And of course, the answer to that is no. Now, in order to substantiate what I'm saying, there are a variety of books you can read, but one good history book that gives it to you plain as day is the Bible itself. And I'll go a little deeper into that, because the term Shemitic and Hamitic that you've been hearing me use, where do these terms come from? And they're biblical terms. All right. Remember, we're using the Bible as a history source. So in the Bible, we know that there was a man named Noah and he had 3 sons. OK. And the story of Noah and his 3 sons ultimately is just trying to explain to us the reemergence of society and civilization after the old ancient period of those times. So that means that those old days before Noah, when that civilization came to its decline, things started over. And the historical, story we're given is called Noah's flood. But it's much deeper than that, y'all. It's much deeper than just this idea that thinking the whole world was flooded with water. In your mind right now, just think about you restarting civilization, okay? And in this restart of civilization, you had basically 3 various ethnic groups that all the people of the earth today stem from one of these 3 primary ethnic groups. And the biblical term used for these 3 different ethnic groups are Japhetic, Shemitic, and Hamitic. The term Japhetic comes from Noah's son Japheth. The term Shemitic comes from Noah's son Shem. And the term Hamitic comes from Noah's son Ham. Now, what's also very important for you to understand is that not only was Noah a melanated man, but all of his sons were melanated men as well. So that means that these were all men that had some type of a brown complexion to them. And if you were to see them today walking in the United States of America, you may call them a so-called black person. And all three of these men represented their own ethnic, melanated, indigenous group. Okay? So keep that in mind. So when we think about the term Ham or Hamitic, the son Ham of Noah, his offspring and descendants were the people of Misr or Mizraim, what we call Egypt, the Cushites or the original Ethiopian stock of modern day what we'll call Africa, and the Canaanite Phoenicians, okay? The Canaanite Phoenicians. So these are all different Hamitic ethnic groups, okay? Now today we use the collective term quote unquote Africans to categorize these various Hamitic groups. So the Hamitic people are Africans. Now that term African is just a catch-all term, but you're really talking about the different Hamitic ethnic groups that stem from Egypt, Cush, Canaan, and he had another son called Put, and all the civilizations that they created. And these were melanated men and women that came from these Hamitic groups. So just like today, if you see a person, you can look at them and tell that they're from so-called Africa. You may not know what country they're from, but with some of them, you can look at them and tell that that's a so-called African person, even though they may have the same skin complexion as somebody that's from America. But you can physically look at their phenotype and tell that they are a so-called African. So that's showing you that there are different genetic templates and models that even though it may be all melanated indigenous people of the earth, but they're not all the same. Let's keep going. So we just went through the term Hamitic. So now we know that the Hamitic people are really so-called Africans. The other term is Shem. Now Shem is one of the sons of Noah. His offspring were Abraham, Isaac, Jacob/Israel, and the 12 sons of Jacob/Israel. Now remember, I'm using these as historical terms. So I'm using Abraham as a historical term in man, Isaac as a historical term in man, Israel as a historical term in man, and his 12 sons as historical people. All right. So this Shemitic ethnic group is spread throughout the world via the breaking up of the greater Shemitic Israelite group. Today, they are in the lands of America, Europa, the countries of so-called Africa, the so-called Middle East, and Asia Major and Asia Minor. Today, this Shemitic group is collectively categorized as quote-unquote Negro and quote-unquote Black, regardless of what continent they are on. Throughout the history of the expansion of the quote-unquote Negro Shemitic ethnic groups, they became the first to civilize and establish order in the lands of America. So that means the Shemitic or quote-unquote Negro American tribes, and Europa, meaning the quote-unquote Negro Iberians. In some historical record, they are also referred to as quote-unquote Moorish, which just is a word for a copper-colored, dark-skinned, brown-skinned, bronze-skinned, original man or woman, indigenous quote-unquote Shemitic Negro ethnic groups come in all earth tones, all shades, okay? So we just went through the Shemitic ethnic group, all right? So now we know that the Shemitic ethnic group, the catch-all term for them that's being used today is either Negro or Black. No matter what continent they're on, no matter what language they speak, no matter what religion and culture they have, these people are referred to ethnically as Negro and Black. I'm going to say it one more time. So you have two different ethnic melanated groups. The Hamitic group, which are African, and the Shemitic group, which are Negro or quote unquote Black. Okay? Now remember, in North America, mainland North America, the way they classify people here is by white, black, and they give you the Native American category, etc. But as far as the true people that are indigenous to this land, they refer to them as Negro or Black. That's how you can tell historically they are the Shemitic people, okay? Because the Shemitic people historically were melanated, but they weren't from the Hamitic tribes. And later on, we're going to substantiate that more because the Bible gives you that history very, very clear. So understand that you have Shemitic Israelite groups in America, Europa, some of the countries of Africa, the Middle East, Asia Major, and Asia Minor. So that means these people they spread out throughout the world. And these are a greater Negro ethnic group. And the reason why they spread throughout the world is because the 12 sons of Israel, or Jacob, all that great empire, or the great kingdom rather, that they came from, it was split up. 10 tribes were in the north and 2 were in the south. And these 2 different groups that were split eventually were taken into captivity by various foreigners. And as time went on in history, they were spread throughout the world. And a lot of the times when they would leave their captive situations through their own voyages and adventures, they would go on journeys and go to other places of the world. So as it pertains to the Americas right now, because some of y'all probably wonder, well, where do the indigenous people of the Americas come from? Well, I'm telling you right now, they come from the Shemitic group that after the so-called Noah's flood and the reestablishing civilization in the Americas, the first people to establish civilization in the Americas, meaning that come from South America, Central America, and North America, the ancient civilization that was here, the information that was used, that remnant of knowledge and wisdom that existed before the days of Noah, that stuff was reestablished here by an indigenous Negro group that was a Shemitic group. All right, keep that in mind. All right, so yes, we're talking about the ancient Inca, the ancient Maya, the ancient Aztec, the ancient Mississippians. These people come from a Shemitic group. Now, yes, we're going to see in a little bit, there was a little bit of a Hamitic admixture, but primarily it comes from we all come from a Shemitic group. Just like this, if you have, let's say, some apple juice, it's 100% apple juice, right? And let's say you take 5% of some cranberry juice and you pour it in there and shake it up. Does that 5% of cranberry juice change the genetic makeup of it being apple juice? Isn't it still apple juice with a small admixture, but the overall majority of it is still apple juice? So I'm saying the same with the Shemitic and Hamitic ethnic groups. Our people are predominantly Shemitic. And as time went on and through different historical events, there were small admixtures of Hamitic people in. But primarily, we're the apple juice. We're still the Shemitic group that descended from that expansion of that greater 12 tribes that descended from Abraham and Shem. So just keep that in mind. So the quote-unquote Negro, Shemitic, or so-called Black ethnic groups are indigenous to mainland North America, Central America, and South America. Okay? Keep that in mind. Also, the gentleman that you see on the screen right now, this is one of the kings of Florida in the 1500s, in the early 1500s. His name is King Satoria, if I'm not mistaken. All right. If you Google right now, Moor with emerald clusters, this image will come up. And if you do deeper research into who this man is, he is the king of Florida in about the early to mid 1500s, and his name is King Satoria. Let's look at his face real quick. This is the king of Florida in the 1500s. You see how he looks? Look at his facial features. This is a Shemitic American man that was the king of Florida in the 1500s. So we don't need to go all the way to Africa or anywhere else to figure out about nobility. There was a nobility right here that we need to do more research into. All right, and that's what you're looking at. You're looking at one of them right now, one of the noble figures of Florida, the king of Florida. All right, Satoria. So let's keep going forward. So my next point is this: the Negro, so-called Negro rather, Shemitic mainland North Americans, and the quote-unquote Negro Shemitic Central / Island and Southern Americans or Hispanics, these are all Negro Shemitic people. So us here in mainland North America, Central and South America. That's why if you look at the people in the northern part of South America, of like Guatemala, the Yucatan, these are the Shemitic Olmec people. They don't look no different than us. All right. Now you do have certain Hamitic families that came into the island, like of Haiti, etc. But nevertheless, these are predominantly Shemitic people here in the Americas. All right. Because some of y'all may wonder, like when you hear the brothers say, well, how do the Shemitic Israelites, why are you all saying that has a tie to the indigenous American tribes? And that's what you're going into right now. So when you read about the lost Lunas tablet or stone rather, that they found in New Mexico, and you read about all these different Paleo-Hebrew writing that they would find on artifacts and rocks, finding the 10 Commandments on a stone with an inscription of Moses. Where I'm from in Georgia, they have what's called the Metcalf Stone? Basically, it's one of the stones they found, and it had a Minoan script on it. And they took it to the college in Columbus, Georgia. And when they deciphered it, they were finding out that the indigenous tribes of Georgia was speaking a language that was similar to what they were speaking in the Mediterranean. And we know that the people in the Mediterranean were what? They were speaking a Canaanite, Hamitic, Shemitic Israelite language. So even the indigenous tribes here, although they may have had different dialects and a different form of it, but that mother Shemitic tongue that they were probably speaking back in the days, the ancient days of Shem, it still existed here a little bit. Because remember, when Abraham went into Canaan, he took his original language, he took the Canaanite language and he mixed it, okay? So when his descendants, when they expanded throughout the world, the remnant of that language, it existed with them. And there were other languages that branched off of that. So understand that when you're talking about phonics, like when we were back in elementary school, hooked on phonics, the word phonics or the alphabet, the language comes from Phoenician. Phonics, Phoenician, Phoenix, like the city of Phoenix in Arizona. That's a Phoenician term, and this goes back to ancient Canaan. All right. So understand that under the kingdom of Solomon, there was a relationship between King Solomon and the King Hiram of Tyre, and Tyre is a Canaanite descendant. All right. So the Israelites, the Shemitic Israelites, and the Canaanite Phoenicians or the Canaanite Tyrians, Sidonians, they were working with each other throughout history. Trading, culture, etc. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is this. How did Negro or so-called Black Americans get a small percentage of so-called Hamitic DNA? Throughout history and times, some of our people intermixed with Hamitic groups, different Hamitic ethnic groups, particularly in Mizraim or Egypt and Canaan / Phoenicia or Europa. So you know how you got some of the brothers and sisters, they'll go do these DNA tests, which I don't agree with at all. But it'll come back and it'll say you got a little bit of African, a little bit of European, a little bit of Asian, right? But you'll always see that African percentage in there. And it makes us wonder, well, where does that come from? All right. And it comes from, the times where our people were living amongst Hamitic people. This is recorded, in the story of the Shemitic Israelites in Egypt. All right. They all look the same. Okay. The Shemitic Israelites and the Hamitic Egyptians, they look the same. This is recorded in the story of Jesus when his parents and baby Jesus escaped into Egypt to flee away from the king of Rome, Herod, who was looking to slay the Messiah. All right. Because he was dealing with his Babylonian astrology and he thought the Messiah was going to come and destroy his kingdom. So his mother and his father took him and they fled into Egypt. If the Shemitic Israelites weren't a brown-skinned, bronze-complected, dark-skinned people, how would they blend in with the Egyptians? The Roman military would have easily been able to point them out. So that's how you know that the ancient Shemitic Israelites back then and today, they had to have looked, or at least in skin complexion, somewhat similar to the ancient Egyptians. All right. Also, I want you to keep in mind that the Hamitic mariners and traders from Northwest Africa was sailing to the Americas since ancient times. We know that up in modern day Michigan. A lot of the copper mines in Michigan, the indigenous Negro tribes of North America, we were, mining the copper. And some of the Hamitic families, cousins, were coming over from the Mediterranean, and they would take, they would trade with us, get some of the copper and take it back over there. As a matter of fact, I remember investigating one time, and I came across a documentary, and it talked about a lot of ships that were over in the areas of the Mediterranean that sunk. And when the people, were able to excavate and pull them out the water, test some of the material, they were able to tell they came from the Bronze Age, or basically that same era that the copper was being mined out of the Americas. And also a lot of the elements that they were finding, they were only indigenous to the Americas. So that goes to show you that there was a communication between indigenous American people and also the people of the Mediterranean or Northwest Africa. All right. Also keep in mind that, there were very, very small Hamitic groups that were brought over to the Americas in servitude of the amalgamated Europans. All right. So keep in mind with that as well. So so overall, like I said, our people are like the apple juice. It's a gallon of apple juice, but you had these small percentages of, Hamitic admixture throughout history. So today, if it shows up, that's why. All right. And also, I'm going to say this. When it says European, they're talking about Shemitic Iberian Negro of Europe. So really, the America link ethnically is similar to the ethnic link of Europa, because of Europa, the original Irish, the original Celts, I like to call them the Iberians, the people from the South. They were a Negro Shemitic people. So they may have spoke a different language and had a different culture, etc. But ethnically, they were the same as the indigenous people here. So if they were to mix with each other, after a while, you wouldn't be able to tell who was who. And that's what happened. So a lot of the Hamitic men and women, when they would come here, they would mix with the indigenous men and women that were here. All right. My next point. Who are modern day fair-skinned Latinos and Hispanics? These people are descendants of Shemitic/Negro American tribes, Hamitic/African tribes, and an admixture of the Pale/Visigothic Roman Caucasian tribes of Southern Europa. All right. So understand that, some of the fair-skinned Latino people of Central and Southern America, these people are an admixture or an amalgamation of the Negro Iberians, meaning they have a mixture of or a certain genetic link, a certain percentage of some of the melanated people of Southern Europa, the pale Visigothic European Romans. So majority of the people that you may see in so-called Spain and Portugal today that are pale skinned, and they practice Southern European Spanish culture, because that's another thing, like Southern European Spanish culture, pale Roman culture, that's not the same as fair-skinned Mexican Central American culture. No, those Southern European pale people don't look at fair-skinned Mexicans as the same people. They just don't. Okay, and the cultures aren't the same either. The people in so-called Mexico or the Americas, they have more of a, as I say, an indigenous American, Maya, ancient Shemitic, Moorish, Iberian type of culture versus a Roman Christian Catholicism culture. But once again, a lot of them have that Caucasian supremacy, quote unquote, white supremacist, white, inferiority mentality. A lot of these so-called Mexican people do. Or I'll say Latino, Hispanic people. So they'll try to reach out and latch on to their Roman conquistador side, where really that's not the majority of who they are. Okay. Once again, this is not racism. This is just history. All right. So as I said, they are a mixture of the Negro Iberians and the pale European Romans of Spain and Portugal, entering into Northwest Africa in the early 1500s. And intermingling with the Shemitic and Hamitic groups that were already in West Africa. They are more not Negro Iberian American than they are Spanish. But as I said, unfortunately, the mass amalgamation has caused a confusion as to the origins, okay? And the Spanish link they have is really, as I say, a pale Visigothic Roman Catholic conquistador element, all right? So, you know, when you see these, you know, some of the fair-skinned Mexican American people or Guatemalan American people or, you know, whatever, we'll say Central American or South American country they come from, if they're fair-skinned, pale-skinned, now you know where they come from. And also they may even have a small admixture of the Siberian Mongoloid, depending on, you know, who was mixing with who, okay? So, you know, hopefully you all gained something from this, but I just wanted to do a history tape so the people can get an idea of some of these ethnic groups and who's who and not get confused just because somebody's of color, all right? So you all stay tuned for the next one. I'm out.